All right, and welcome back to the Paisan Sports podcast. Dante de Placido joined as always by, yeah, almost forgot again, presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante de Placido joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I've got to ask, what's the deal with kickers this season? They can't make a 20-yarder. They can't make a 30-yarder, a 40, a 50. And why are the college kids on college game day kicking better than them? What is going on?
Yeah, it seems like kicking is down around
It's
the league.
down tremendously, dude. It's like every week there's at least one game where a team loses due to bad kicking. And
It
some
really
it's
just it
usually
really
like two
just
or
in
three
general
games.
doesn't it feel like in general that just kicking isn't as important and it doesn't make as big as a factor in like today's football, like at least for this season, because I mean it does win games for you in very close games and you can win by field goals, but it just seems like a lot of the top teams in the league don't even elect to kick too often. Like if you look at a team like the Lions or the Eagles, they like to go for it a lot of the times and take the ball out of their kickers' foot or shoe, I guess, instead of hand. Shoe. So but yeah, it's odd. The kicking is down. I don't know if that has any result to do with it. I don't know if Jake Elliott for the Eagles is struggling because he doesn't get as many opportunities. We talked about that before, and he's not ready for the occasion when he does get the opportunity. But at the end of the day, when you're a kicker, all you do is practice kicking, so you should be good at kicking. It's almost as if like a basketball player's only job was to shoot free throws. Don't you think you would be pretty good at shooting free throws, Dante? As a professional basketball player if that was your only job?
Yeah, the one difference with that, however, is shooting free throws is very
It's the
controlled
same
and
distance, I
it
guess, but
well no, it's a sustained distance and it's a very controlled environment. You never have to worry about wind or temperatures or things of that matter. It's also you're always dead middle. It's not only just distance, you're always dead middle as opposed to being on the right hash mark or the left hash mark. But either way, I mean, just in general, just it seems like none of the kickers are really doing that well this year. Jake Elliott's having a down year. Justin Tucker is having a down year. Those are the two best kickers in
Young
football.
Hoku has missed a
Yeah,
couple
even
kicks.
Young Hoku hasn't looked the best at times. Jake Elliott, he looked good this past week. But
Justin Tucker's not having a good year.
yeah,
For like the first time in his career. I mean,
I
I
don't
guess
know
the best
what's
kicker
going
right now
on.
is like Chris Boswell on the Steelers. He's the
Yeah,
only
I
one
don't
and
know what's going on this year. But in terms of a kicker's importance, I think kickers are more important today than they used to be, just off the fact that they're able to hit much longer field goals than they used to be able to. I mean, 60 yarders feel like the new 50 yarder. It seems like every kicker is able to hit from 60.
I don't know if I would go that far. How often do we see a 60-yard
Well,
kick?
I'm gonna put it like this. I'm gonna put it like this.
We see
Wait,
long
wait.
50-yard kicks.
Hold on. I want to point out a point here. I was watching earlier. I was watching the highlights from the 4th and 26 game, right? And at one point in that game, the Green Bay Packers were facing a fourth down from the 40-yard line, from the Eagles' 40-yard line. It was a fourth down, and they punted. That would not happen in today's NFL. If you're stopped at the 40-yard line, you're going to kick a 58-yard field goal, especially late in a playoff game. And it was a tie game at that. I mean, that just shows you the evolution of kickers. I think a 60-yarder really is the new 50-yarder because I remember when I was a kid, a 50-yarder, that was like considered, if you go out to kick a 50-yarder, that's no easy task. There's a good chance you're going to miss. And
I think you're
a
exaggerating a little bit.
58
We
or
don't
a 60 wasn't something you would even attempt. And it's been attempted a lot more lately. I think kickers have really evolved in terms of distance.
I mean, we see some of the top kickers take attempts from that far, but I wouldn't say that it's like a common. I think it's still rare and seldom that we do see 60-yard field goals. I think I would agree with like a 55-yard field goal. I think every team's electing to kick a 55-yard field goal nowadays, depending on the scenario, and like you said, that's has a lot to do with kicking. Is the situation for the kicking situation, whether it's weather has anything to do with it, or the wind, or there's certain situations where any kicker, it doesn't matter who they are, you're gonna have to punt the ball just based off of the climate and the circumstances. But I would agree that like a 55-yard field goal is what every team is attempting and every kicker can make. But I think you're exaggerating on a 60-yard field goal. We don't even see a lot of 60-yard field goals even attempted.
You don't see a lot of them, but you used to see none of them. You used to only see a 60-yard attempt if it was like the end of the half, and a
Well, I think that's still
60-yard field goal is more
that's
feasible
still
than a
when we
Hail
see
Mary
them, and it
attempt.
was like there were certain
No,
guys that could
you
kick them
see it
back to
just
back.
in normal situations nowadays, honestly. I've seen teams just line up for a 60-yarder throughout the course of a game, which just used to never happen at all.
Hold on 1 second.
Well, I don't know what Zach is researching here, but I think it's time we move on to talking about a team that is continuing to light it up week by week. The Philadelphia Eagles coming off a big win against a very hot LA Rams team. I'm going to let him keep researching, but I was a little worried going into that game. I was a little worried. They were red hot, and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua were really the biggest test of this secondary so far. You can look at the other wide receivers that the Eagles secondary has gone up against, such as Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, CD Lamb, but this was the first time it was two elite wide receivers the Eagles secondary had to face, and they struggled a bit at times, but for the most part, the defense really did its job. And I'm just stating that because why even state the obvious of the Saquon Barkley performance?
Yeah, I mean the defense did their job. I was just trying to research how many 60-yard field goals were
I
attempted
already
against.
tried researching it myself. I found nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. But yeah, on the Eagles front, I think the Eagles are doing a tremendous job of just keeping teams in check on defense. Even if they're allowing teams to drive down the field, they don't allow them to score often, and they're getting turnovers, just like the first drive that we saw, where the Rams were driving all the way down the field, and it ends up with a Eagles turnover. So the Eagles are doing their thing. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua, although combined, they saw the end zone one time very late in the game. They were pretty much held in check, and that's
Yeah, and
just
that was a
because they've been
garbage time touchdown. You really can't
yeah,
even
exactly.
consider that.
So they've kept this team. They've keep teams in check, and even if they allow a touchdown, they don't allow it to snowball and accumulate over time, and keep allowing the volume like a lot of these top receivers in the league we see, especially like Cooper Kupp, a guy that can go out there. I think one of the games this year, I don't know if it was the first game of the season, it was one of the first games of the season. He had like 14 catches in a game. So if you let a guy like that and his connection with Matthew Stafford get going for a while, then they can really beat you up over time. And they just didn't allow that on Sunday. They didn't allow the run game for the Rams to be too big of a factor. And I think their defensive line really kind of bullied. I think that's where the Eagles really won the game versus the Rams, was in the trenches, and they really just handled business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they've been doing week by week. I mean, I almost hate to say, because I feel like everyone's saying it this week, but the Eagles, I mean, a huge part of their success is they're just wearing teams down. That's why every first half is close for the most part. And then once they get late in the third quarter, they just pull ahead because the offensive line, the defensive line is so physical, and they're able to just wear out their opponents. And once the O line has weared out the D line and the linebackers, then that's when it's time for Saquon Barkley to take advantage and put the game away. And that's what we've been seeing week after week.
Yeah, and that's what they've been doing. Even we haven't really even seen this team completely healthy for like a long stretch of time either, especially during this win streak. It just seems like one guy or another guy goes out down, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And it was kind of scary when Saquon went down for a little bit in that game. He was down for a couple seconds, and I thought like, oh man, here goes our season. And he got right back up and obviously did his thing. But Devontae Smith's been banged up at certain points of time. AJ Brown's been banged up. Jordan Mailata, um, Lane Johnson, Mekhi Becton's been banged up sometimes. We haven't seen Dallas Goedert. I mean, you can just go down the list of the injuries that this offense has had, and we just haven't had the full product. But it always seems like they're able to figure things out. And it was a struggle early in the season when they didn't have an identity, but now with the offense, they know what they want to do. They're going to run the ball with Saquon Barkley, and obviously they're extremely successful in doing that. And the offensive line is just playing tremendous right now. And it really doesn't matter who's on the offensive line. They've just been getting it done. But when they're fully healthy and they had the complete unit, because it's not like Saquon just started going off. I mean, he was going off when Jordan was hurt. He was going off when Lane was hurt. He had a huge Saints game when Lane and Mekhi were hurt. So he's gotten it done with different offensive line guys blocking for him. But the full healthy offensive line, you see what he's capable of, going for 255 rushing yards.
Yeah, and not only is the offensive line fully healthy, but one guy who's starting to absolutely dominate in the run game is a guy who I wasn't very high on at first. I wanted Tyler Steen in there instead of him, and that's Mekhi Becton. He's just bullying people. And the Eagles' offensive line in general, they're doing such a good job, not only at winning at the line of scrimmage, but getting out to the second level and just shoving people to the ground and making way for Saquon Barkley. Some guys are even running out there and keeping up with him, such as Landon Dickerson. I mean, I didn't even realize Landon Dickerson had them.
Dickerson's been a beast since day one. I mean, he was just a versatile player. If he never got hurt, he wouldn't have been a second round pick. He would have been a top draft pick, probably a top 15 pick in the draft. So in his draft class. So, I mean, the entire offensive line is absolutely loaded and they're locked up. I mean, Lane Johnson's probably the only guy. If you go through their entire lineup on both sides of the ball, Brandon Graham, Darius Slay, and Lane Johnson are like the only guys that like aren't within the same age threshold of each other that like looks like they could be on the team for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's pretty crazy how good they are. And some of these guys have just been brought in from different places. I mean, Mekhi Becton, yeah, like you said, nobody really expected him to come on like this. He was signed to be a tackle, a swing tackle. And then in camp, they transitioned on the guard. You really don't see guards that big. They're usually always tackles and left in space, but you see what he can do in close quarters. And he's just a wrecking ball. He just absolutely blows people up off the line of scrimmage. And if he gets hands on a linebacker, it's just completely over. Cam Jurgens getting on the second level. I mean, that guy can just, move like exactly like Jason Kelce. I'm not going to say he's exactly like Jason Kelce, but it's almost like a seamless transition. And this is something that Jason Kelce was trying to tell us for how many years, that it was going to be a seamless transition because of how much he believed in Cam Jurgens. So Jordan, obviously, didn't even play football until
Jordan Mailata has just evolved
it's
into
crazy
an
that they
absolute
figured like you figure
monster.
out one of the most important positions in the NFL and you get it right with a guy like that at that size, that's that athletic, and you can have a guy like that that's also young, be a part of your offensive line and anchor your offensive line. And the guy didn't even know how to play football like less than 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it feels like every time the Eagles have an elite offensive line, at least since the Doug Peterson era, since 2016, it seems like every time they have an elite offensive line, there's four guys who are just elite. And then there's one guard who isn't as good as the rest. He's like decent. He gets the job done. But the other four guys are Pro Bowl caliber offensive linemen. An example 2 years ago in 2022. Um, I would say Samalu was kind of the weak link of that line. Not that Samalu wasn't good; he was great, but he wasn't like the rest of them. And then in 2017, you had Jason Peters, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, and Lane Johnson. And as of off the top of my head, I can't even remember who played left guard that year.
Was it
But
Steven Wisniewski?
it was Wisniewski. You're absolutely right. Like I said, Steven Wisniewski, he was good, but he's not those other guys. This feels like the first time where all five guys are elite. I mean, we just talked about all five
And
of them.
Tyler Steen has played well when he has been
Yeah.
in there, and Fred Johnson's been serviceable. Fred Johnson hasn't played as good as I would say Tyler Steen has when he's been in there, but Fred
Well,
Johnson's also had a tougher responsibility of blocking the toughest pass rusher on every single team. You know what I mean? When he's been in there, so
yeah, well, pump the brakes a little bit on Fred Johnson. I mean, on the surface, it looks like he's played well, but I was actually looking on PFF earlier. Fred Johnson, in the limited time he played, has allowed 7 sacks this season, which it's not very good. But I don't know. Maybe it's just because he does well in the run.
I mean, you
Where
also had to
sometimes he has
account for
good
how many of
picks.
those times. I mean, Jalen is known to one of the tendencies that he does have is hold on to the ball for way too long.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, there was
Um,
a couple times that he did get blown up. I mean, the Giants game was a struggle in the beginning of the game when he was in there because they were getting good pass rush, but they ended up obviously winning that game and dominating after that point and the struggles in the beginning. But yeah.
yeah. So in summary, this might be the best Eagles offensive line I think we've seen in quite some time. And going into the season, I knew, unlike a lot of delusional Giants fans, I knew that if you took the talents of Saquon Barkley and you look at what he was able to do behind the worst offensive line in all of football all that time, his best season was 1,300 rushing yards, which is a terrific season. And that's behind the worst offensive line in football. You take that and you put that behind the offensive line we just described. I knew he was going to really turn it up. I figured 1,600 rushing yard season, 1,700 rushing yard season, game changer, Christian McCaffrey type signing. But this, nobody could have envisioned this. He is on record breaking pace right now. He just put 255 rushing yards on the Rams' head. That was more total yards than they had for the entire game. It seems like he's just breaking off home run plays with regularity. He can do just about anything he wants on the football field. It's like watching a guy. It's like watching an NFL player play against a college team. It's absolutely insane what he's doing right now.
Yeah, it is pretty ridiculous, especially at the size that he is and how athletic he is for his size. I mean, if you're building a running back, I mean, what else would you want besides, you know, Saquon Barkley? You know,
Yeah. And you
sorry,
look
my
at,
connection was cutting out a little bit there as
oh,
well.
good.
It
You
cut
look
short.
at the top running backs of the game, right? Um, you know, it, well, first of all, you look at your standard running backs, right? And you'll have your elusive backs who are shorter, they're quick, they're shifty, they got some good speed, but they don't have all the size and the strength, right? And then you have your power backs who are a bit slower, run downhill, they're big, strong, they can shove people out of the way. But then you look at the elite level running backs, guys who have a mix of kind of a bit of both. You look at Derrick Henry, a guy who's absolutely massive, who can run people over, who can outrun people, speed down the field. And then you have some other elusive backs who, are a bit stronger, a bit bigger and stronger, and they have the same capabilities as your typical elusive backs, but they have some decent strength as well. But and those are like the elite level running backs, right? But then you have Saquon Barkley. He's really the only running back that can actually do it all. Because you look at, the fast power backs like Derrick Henry, which in themselves are a rarity. Yeah, he's big, he's strong, and he's super fast. He can run you over, he can break away from the defense, but he's not super agile. He's not going to juke people out. He's not going to pull off some of the moves Saquon's doing. Saquon is able to play like an elusive back, like a receiving back, like a power back. He's able to do all of those things. He can backwards hurdle you and also dribble your head off of the gridiron. I've honest to God never seen this level of play from a running back before.
Yeah, I mean, running backs have always been my favorite position. So to see a running back have this much success, and I've always been a big fan of Saquon, being a fan of running backs, even though he was in our division playing for another team. Excuse me. But uh, Saquon, like you said, he can do it all. He's gigantic. He's fast. He's quick. He's agile. He can run you over. He can stiff arm you. He can jump backwards over you. He can jump forward over you. He can spin. He can juke. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He can pick up blitzes and the pass game. I mean, he can do literally everything for your football team. So for people to say that running backs aren't valuable, I mean, look at some of the teams that are having success this year, and they were already good teams, but Josh Jacobs on the Packers, Derrick Henry on the Ravens, who was going to match up versus Saquon this weekend. Obviously, Saquon himself, Joe Mixon got traded to the Texans. Those four guys are like top in the running back categories right now, and they're having phenomenal seasons. And they're making a huge impact for their teams and the game. And a lot of people think in today's NFL, all you can only win by throwing the football down the field, and everything's made out to be about the quarterback. But at the end of the day, you can win football games by having a strong run game, especially with the formula the Eagles have. I mean, how rare is it that a team like look at the Ravens? They had a really good running game because they have one of the historic running quarterbacks of all time, and then they finally get a good running back in there. But they have Zay Flowers, who's pretty good at receiver, but he still hasn't completely proven himself being so young into his career. They have some good tight ends, but their passing game, besides Lamar having a really good statistical year, isn't as threatening with the weapons that they have. But look at what the Eagles have. The Eagles have two guys that they're paying $25+ million to in the passing game, and they have a dynamic running back like Saquon. So if it does come to a situation where they need to throw the ball, they can, but they're winning football games strictly with running the ball because of how dominant their offensive line and Saquon is behind the offensive line.
Yeah, and not only that, but the other guy you got to talk about, who I thought he made a couple plays that surprised me on Sunday night, and that's Jalen Hurts. Now, I've always been a big supporter of Jalen Hurts. A lot of people are still down on him, but what I saw him do twice on Sunday that you never see him do, which gives me more confidence in him now, is twice I saw him take a snap and quickly get rid of the ball over the middle of the field right into AJ Brown's hands. That shocked me because there's a lot of things Jalen Hurts does well on the football field, in my opinion. One thing he never really did well was quick thinking, get the ball out fast, over the middle of the field. And he showed that twice on Sunday night. One time it was a play action out of under center. He faked the handoff and delivered a strike to A.J. Brown over the middle of the field. And then the second time, it was late in the game. They kind of needed a first down. Rams sent, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was an all-out blitz. Hurts took the snap, two-step drop, and just threw it right on the money to A.J. Brown. And I was just in shock that I had witnessed that from Jalen Hurts. But that gives me a lot more confidence in him moving forward, now seeing that he's able to do that.
Yeah, and they're not asking Jalen to do too much. I mean, they're pretty much every game. It's like, what? Go out there and throw 25 pass attempts. And he's been efficient in those. Don't turn the ball over. He's going to get his looks in the run game and some design runs ran for him, especially the tush push itself, but he has a couple of design runs that they'll run out of the shotgun. They're still not running too much under center, which I would like to see a little bit more of. That might still could unlock this offense to another level. And that's what's crazy is this offense, it seems like pretty simplistic right now what they're doing, but they're so dominant at it that teams can't stop it. So why stop what they're doing? You know what I mean? So but I do think that Jalen's going to have to start spreading the ball out a little bit more in that game. He got the ball to Saquon, Dallas Goedert, and AJ Brown, and he always obviously
Well, he
has a really
did. He
good
did.
connection
In
with
all
AJ. But
fairness, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. In all fairness, he also spread the ball to Johnny Wilson. It's not his fault. Johnny Wilson dropped what should have been a touchdown catch. So you got, if you're looking at that as from an evaluation standpoint on Jalen Hurts, you got to also look at
yeah,
he
but
got the ball to
those
Johnny
guys, we're
Wilson.
talking about the guys not named Saquon, Dallas Goedert, or AJ Brown. Each of them had at least had one target, just one target each. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I mean,
there's
they're
a
young
few.
guys. Young guys. Obviously, they don't have Devonte Smith right now, so it's a different situation. Their passing game is just going to be limited in itself. With that being the case, but I would like to see a wide receiver 3 actually emerge into this offense. That's one of my critiques for the
Well,
offense because they're not going to run like that every single week on people. I think they can run consistently, and the one good thing that we saw was also it wasn't just Saquon having success in the run game. Kenny Gainwell looked really good coming out of the backfield too. With his touchdown run. I mean, it kind of was like Saquon-esque where he's breaking a couple tackles to get into the end zone. So I think they can run the ball with numerous people, but you don't want to just rely on Saquon having a berserk game every single game because if teams shut down the run, then you're going to have to open up the pass game a little bit more.
well, so here's what I have to say about that. A lot of people right now are saying like, "Oh, well, I'm worried if they're playing a team who jumps out to a lead and now you need to use the pass game to catch up, or if the run game isn't working, can Jalen Hurts run the offense throwing the ball?" I mean, people are acting like we didn't not have Saquon the past 2 seasons. You watched Jalen Hurts go 10-1 without Saquon Barkley. You watched him go 14-3 and go to the Super Bowl and go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes without Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts has proven in the past that he can get it done with his arm plenty. But now we're in a season where we're run heavy offense. It's like, well, what happens if they can't use the run game? And it's the only reason we're asking that question this year is because the run game has been so effective. We haven't had to throw the ball. But if a history has showed us anything, it's that we are well capable of throwing the ball. I don't look at that as a worry at all, really. Not one bit, if I'm going to be honest.
I agree. I think he's proven it in the past, that just not this year. So that's the only
Because
thing.
he hasn't tried to this year, The run game has been
Well, it's not
so.
even just that. There's been numerous games with Devontae in the lineup, and they just haven't utilized Devontae at all. He's always going to have a connection to AJ Brown, but Dallas Goedert has been underutilized at times as well.
Well, yeah,
Saquon
I mean
is
they've
good in
been
the pass
running the
game, but
ball a million times a game. Of course, the wide receivers and tight ends are going to get less targets, less action. They're running the ball constantly.
yeah, well, I agree. I want them to keep running the ball, and I'm happy that they've picked up this identity. I think they can start using Kenny Gainwell a little bit more to take a little bit off Saquon because they're in a really good position, and hopefully for the playoffs. I mean, he's third in the MVP odds right now, so I would love to see him.
I think he
Uh,
was fourth list. I checked.
I'm pretty sure he's third at plus 650
I
behind
think
Josh
I
Allen and
think
Lamar Jackson.
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and I'm pretty sure there was one more guy still ahead of him. When I checked this morning after the Ravens game last night, he went from plus 600 to plus 700. I guess because Lamar did
What are you
well.
checking on?
FanDuel.
Yeah, I saw that like the last time I was on FanDuel, I saw it at plus 650, but
Oh, let me. Yeah, but then it moved after the Ravens
and
game.
Jared Goff are tied at
Yeah,
plus 100 right now.
Jared Goff, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen are ahead of Saquon. So Saquon's fourth, currently at plus 700. Jared Goff is also at plus 700. They just have him listed above him. Okay, so he's basically tied for third. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are ahead of that. He's also right now minus 320 for the Offensive Player of the Year award. He's a lock at this point. He's a lock for either one of the two awards. It's going to be interesting to see if he can pull off being a running back that wins the MVP award. I think he, in my opinion, and I'm not saying this as in this is what he needs to do to deserve the MVP. I think this is what he needs to do to actually win it based on the fact that they never give it to non-quarterbacks. I think in order to win the MVP trophy, I think he needs to break the single season rushing record and the Eagles have to get the 1 seed. I think that's what needs to happen
You think
for him
both?
to win MVP. I think so. I think so because
I
mean
think he
look
needs
at
to
what
break the single
look at
season.
what Christian McCaffrey did, and didn't win it. Look at what Cooper Kupp did, winning the Triple Crown and didn't win it. And not only did they not win it, they didn't even come close to winning it. And when Adrian Peterson had his insane season and he won MVP in 2012, he won it by a small margin. So I think in order, and that was 12 years ago when running backs were much more valued in people's eyes than they are today. So I think in order to win the MVP trophy, he needs to break the record and the Eagles have to get the 1 seed.
I don't know if I agree with the Eagles having to get the 1 seed. I think if he breaks the record, just by default, that the Eagles will probably be a top 2 seed. So I don't think they need to get the 1 seed for him to win the MVP. How do you feel about him breaking? What is the record seen as? Because obviously there's 17 games on the slate now, so the record would be broken in more games than it was set by. Do you think that has anything to do with it? I think if he does break the record, though, he'll definitely win it. Derrick Henry has a 2,000-yard rushing season on his resume as well, and he didn't win it, but he didn't break the record, so that's a little bit different, I guess. But I think if Saquon breaks the record, he'll definitely win it. But I don't think if he rushes for a 2,000, necessarily he'll win it unless the Eagles are a 1 seed and it's clear that he's like leading the way. You know what I mean? So I think that's a different formula for it. But how do you feel about him breaking the record in more than games than it was set?
Well,
Because some people feel like that. So, what if he breaks the record, and then in week 17, say he breaks the record in week 17, and then has a week 18 game, and the Eagles are still playing maybe for the 1 seed, and they're still competitive, and he's still being used, and he average over 17 games is higher than the average of Eric Dickerson this season per game. You know what I mean? The yardage total per game. I think that would be more impressive. You know what I mean?
Well, I think you're overthinking it right there because if he breaks the record week 17, that means he broke the record in 16 games. And, in the future, when people look back on the season, they might not have the knowledge to know that he actually broke it in the appropriate amount of games. But if he breaks it week 17, then he broke the record in the same amount of games. Yeah. And then week 17 is irrelevant. I think the ideal, first of all, in order for him to break the record by week 17, I just did the math because he would need about 700 more yards, a little bit more than that, but basically 700 more yards with 5 games to do it. And so he would need to average 140 yards per game. Now, but see, here's the thing: you laugh, but for Saquon Barkley, that's actually possible, which is the funny part.
I'm just laughing about how ridiculous that would be to watch over a 5-game stretch of time if that's what he's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had 140 yards per game. He just had 2 70-yard runs in 1 game. So that would just be like that on repeat for how many weeks in a row. So
yeah. So look at it like this, right? First of all, I want to see what is he currently averaging per game. He is averaging 126 yards per game. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And
he has what? He has 2 or 3 non-100-yard games.
Yeah, I think 3. My ideal scenario would be, and this is feels even further out of the realm of possibility with how good the Lions are. But my ideal scenario is week 17, Saquon Barkley breaks the record and the Eagles lock up the 1 seed. Because then that would mean in week 18, Saquon doesn't play. So then, forever etched in history, when you look at what Saquon Barkley did this season, he would have broken the single season record in 16 games. So he broke it clean. Now, the likelihood of that is very small because one, he would have to average 140 yards per game over the next 5 games. And two, the Eagles would have to lock up the 1 seed by week 17, currently a game behind the Lions, with the Lions just not losing games at all. It would be very unlikely, but to me, that would be the absolute ideal scenario.
And we think realistically, like 25 carries a game could possibly get him to the 140 mark with how efficient he's been
Let's do
with
math.
carries.
Let's do
So
math. He averages 6.2 yards per carry, 25 carries times 6.2. That's 155 yards. So yeah, if he gets 25 carries
well,
per
that's not
game,
why I brought that up. I brought it up because I'm thinking over a 5-game stretch, that's another 125 rushing attempts that were thrown onto Saquon's body.
he seems like he's
Because
able
they're
to
gonna start
handle it.
there's gonna the mileage is gonna start piling up at some point. I mean, I wanna ride the horse as long as you can ride the horse, and I think, I mean, it's the heartbeat of the team right now, it's the identity, it's what's winning games for the Eagles, and that's how important he is, that's why he's in the MVP race, and they need to utilize him as such, but, at some point in time, they do have to realize that they're in the, playoff race, and it's more about what they're going to be able to do in the playoffs. They're going to need him to be able to do that throughout the playoffs too, and possibly over a 4-game stretch instead of a 3-game stretch, depending on if they get the 1 seed or the 2 seed. So as much as we can get caught up in the MVP race, and how great it would be and how refreshing it would be and just how historic for a running back, especially in Philadelphia, to win it. I think the ultimate goal is to win the Super Bowl, and they have to utilize Saquon, but also maybe tone him back a little bit if it's not the right situation for the team.
Hold on, I need to look at something real fast. Yep. Okay. Here's something I was thinking about in the shower this morning, but I needed to look up. But I need to look something up, and I completely forgot it until just now. I was thinking about this, right? And this is off the subject of Saquon Barkley. Now, this is now into the subject of if Eagles possibly winning the 1 seed, right? Let's say they win out, hypothetically. It's very unlikely they end up winning out because they're already on a massive win streak and there's still 6 more games to go. But let's say hypothetically the Eagles win out, right? I was thinking, could they, if the Eagles win out, could they go into week 18 with a guaranteed number 1 seed? Because the Vikings and the Lions play each other week 18, right? So I looked at it like this, right? If the Eagles win out, right, that would mean they have a perfect division record, okay? And now let's say hypothetically, the Vikings still have not lost yet going into week 18. So Eagles are what would they be? They would be there's 17 games, so they would
14
be
and 2
14 and 2
heading into
and
week 18.
heading into week 18, and the Lions would be 15 and 1, right? So if that happens and the Lions lose to the Vikings, and of course the Eagles win in week 18, right? They would finish with the same record, 15 and 2, right? But that would mean that the Lions had just lost to the Minnesota Vikings, a divisional game. And the Eagles would have, in this hypothetical scenario, a perfect division record. That would put them ahead of the Lions. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. Then if in this hypothetical scenario, and I forgot to mention also in this hypothetical scenario, the Vikings win out. Okay, it's a big hypothetical here, but just bear with me. The Vikings win out as well. So okay,
Who's
we would
winning
have the
out? The
same.
Vikings? Who's winning out? The Vikings and who else?
The Vikings and the Eagles both win out, and the Lions win out up until week 18, right? So the Eagles and the Vikings finished with the same record, but the Lions just lost that game to the Vikings, so that would put the Eagles ahead of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Lions. So in my head, when I was thinking about this, I was like, "Oh wow!" So if we went out and they only just lose to the Vikings in the final game, even with the same record, we would get the 1 seed. But then I thought, wait a minute, no, Vikings also 15-2. So then I thought, well, wait a minute, is one of their 2 losses in the division? But I was in the shower, so I couldn't look it up. I looked it up just now. The
Yeah,
Vikings
they
they
lost to the
have
Lions.
lost to the Lions. Yeah, so that would be interesting to see. That's a very big hypothetical.
You took a
But
while to wrap that up, but good thing is left on the Lions. I mean, obviously the Lions have more games than these teams that I'm about to mention, but left on their scheduled teams to look out for, they have to still play the Packers one more time, the Vikings one more time, the 49ers, and the Bills. And the
yeah,
Bears.
and not only that, you look at their upcoming game against the Bears, and you might think, well, it's just the Bears. But in recent years, the Lions have done very poorly on Thanksgiving. And you could make the argument, well, they just got good. But even last year, they were very good, and they lost on Thanksgiving to the Green Bay Packers. The Lions have lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive Thanksgiving games. So I'm not completely counting out the Chicago Bears. It seems like ever since Family Guy made that joke about the Lions losing on Thanksgiving, the Lions have not won a Thanksgiving game since then. I don't know if you've ever seen that joke, but Brian is about to get mauled by lions at a zoo on Thanksgiving. And he said, "Come on, it's Thanksgiving. Aren't you guys supposed to be losing a game in Detroit right now?" And the Lions have not won a game
Yeah, they
since that
were
joke
definitely a
aired.
tough team to watch on Thanksgiving every single year, and then they turn it around, and they're actually one of the
But
more exciting teams to
but
watch in
they
the
also
NFL.
lost last year. But they also lost last year on
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
but they were also heavily favored in that game, and they had turned things around by that point. And obviously, the Packers weren't seen as dangerous as they ended up being, and we all know how dangerous the Packers are now. So, but
I'm
yeah,
just
I like the
saying,
Eagles' chances.
do not count out the yearly tradition of the Detroit Lions losing on Thanksgiving.
Well,
That's all I'm saying.
one thing I won't do is guarantee anything with the Chicago Bears because that's a
No,
team that
I'm not guaranteeing the Lions are going to lose, but I'm just saying don't count out the idea of them losing. That's all I'm saying.
Speaking of losing, what do we think about the Eagles Ravens game for this upcoming Sunday? Another primetime game. We have 2 guys in one offense and one backfield that are in the MVP race themselves, and Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And then we have Saquon and Jalen Hurts taking those guys on in Baltimore. So it's going to be a little bit tougher of an environment. The Eagles are actually underdogs once again versus an AFC North opponent. They were underdogs versus the Bengals on the road, and we know how that game ended up. So, Dante, what do you think about the game versus the Ravens on Sunday?
Well, looking at the matchup against the Ravens, right? One thing I do want to talk about is the loss now of Brandon Graham.
I mean, he looks so good versus the Rams too. That's why it was so upsetting. It looked like he turned back the clock for a second, and he was their
Yeah,
best defensive lineman that night. Besides Jalen Carter, he was all over the field. He had that sack. And he was just playing tremendous. And it just seemed like as much as people didn't believe in the defensive line, they were truly starting to come around. They were getting pressure on Stafford the entire night, and late into the game, he gets injured. So it's just really, really upsetting. Their leader in their locker room, so at least he's still going to be around to do that. But it's not the same without him on the field, and especially with Bryce Huff hurt. I mean, Brandon Graham was playing like over 40% of the snaps this year.
Yeah. So two things to that. One, um, this I hope this ends up being a rallying cry for the Eagles. It felt like Jason Peters going down for the year in 2017 was their rallying cry. They brought out the Lane Johnson brought out the jersey when they came out for the Super Bowl, and BG. To me, I think BG is an even bigger person for the Eagles this year. Not that I mean, Jason Peters had the better career, but you look at Brandon Graham, who has really just been the heart and soul of this team for so many years. You look at this being his final season, and now he's out with injury. It just all feels so much more emotional. So I hope the team really rallies behind him and tries to go out and win a Super Bowl for BG. So hopefully it makes that sort of impact. But then here's the thing. We're doing this podcast Tuesday night, right? A lot of people have gotten their podcast out of the way on Monday, have already talked about the Eagles. But we have an advantage of doing it tonight because now we can talk about the new signing at defensive end, a guy who's probably going to get very minimal snaps. But we only had 3 defensive ends before this signing, and that is Charles Harris, who they just picked up off waivers for the Panthers. I think this is actually a really good signing. This is better than what I thought they were going to be able to get, just off the free agent or waiver market. This is a guy who played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games for the Panthers and tallied up 3 sacks on the season, 21 tackles. It seems like he was having a pretty decent year. He's a veteran defensive end. I think for what you're able to get on the free agent or waiver market this late in the season, I think this is a damn good signing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just can't put too much expectations on what he can bring to the table.
No, I'm not going to put a ton of expectations on him, but I figured they would only be able to get an absolute liability at defensive end at this late in the season. And
Yeah, they're going to really have to rely on Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff when he comes back healthy, Jalix Hunt too, who's a young guy who Brandon Graham believes a lot in. So they have 4 guys at the top, but they definitely need some depth with Brandon Graham.
They have 3 guys right now. You're counting Bryce Huff, but that he's not going to be back until the playoffs. This is 6 games where without Charles Harris, you only have 3 defensive ends. So I'm not saying.
Well, they had also Taron Jackson's been on the roster for a couple of years now. Patrick Johnson. They've had guys floating around the roster that.
But those are guys who haven't even been active for games recently. Those are the only guys you can really look at. I'm not saying I expect a big impact from Charles Harris. I'm not saying I expect a lot out of him. I'm not saying I don't expect the other 3 guys you just named to do most of the work on off the edge. I'm just saying I figured they would end up getting a guy who maybe hasn't even played all year, maybe has played this year, but he was a complete liability. He comes to the Eagles. He gets about 8% of the snaps on defense. He goes 3 weeks without even recording a single stat, and it's just a nothing signing. And the other 3 guys are having to really shoulder a lot of the work off the edge. But I think Charles Harris is the kind of signing where he can play about 20% of the snaps, where he can get a sack maybe here and there. Maybe let's say 6 games to go. Maybe let's say he gets 2 or 3 sacks, maybe a considerable amount of pressures. All I'm saying is I think this is a guy who's going to do more than absolutely nothing. And that's what I expected they would be able to get, is a guy that's going to do absolutely nothing. So that's why I think this is a really good signing, because it's more than absolutely nothing, which is what I figured is all they would be able to get at this point in the season.
I gotcha. I feel what you're saying. So, um, the thing about the Ravens is they're deadly. Their offense is pretty balanced. I mean, Lamar's having a really good passing season, and obviously they got Derrick Henry, who just can run the ball down your throat. So I think a lot of pressure this weekend is going to be on the linebackers to make plays in space, especially in the pass game, to shore up the zones, to make sure the ball can't get completed over the middle, and to stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the run game. What do you think the X factor is for the defense this weekend to slow down an offense led by Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson?
I think it's Vic Fangio. Um, Going back on something I talked about much earlier this season, haven't really talked about since. Um,
You know, Vic Fangio, his last time versus Lamar Jackson, gave up 56 points.
I didn't know that. That's a little worrisome, but he didn't have the talented Eagles defense. But I look back, going into the Saints game, I said on this podcast that they need to run more of a 3-4 defense, because at that time they were having a huge problem trying to stop the run. Then in that Saints game, they did run the 3-4 a lot with Jordan Davis at nose tackle, and they did a great job stopping the run. They haven't used the 3-4 since. I think they've exclusively used the nickel package during this entire win streak. But now you're facing Derrick Henry. You're facing a guy who, if not for Saquon Barkley, would be far and wide the best running back in the league. A guy who's absolutely unstoppable. And you have such a great opportunity to counteract that. First of all, you look at the sheer size of Derrick Henry, and you're like, wow, that's an absolute monster. You know who else is an absolute monster? Jordan Davis. So put him at nose tackle in the middle of the D line and surround him with two absolute dogs, Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. And then, two linebackers behind them who, even in your nickel package, you would be using two linebackers anyway. So it's not like, 4-3 versus 3-4. Either way, you have two linebackers out there who are very good at tackling. You also have a safety who's very good at tackling in Reed Blankenship. You have a corner who, although he's very good at tackling, I don't know how well he's going to be able to tackle Derrick Henry, and that's Cooper DeJean. But you have all the personnel you need to be able to slow down Derrick Henry. It just comes down to what scheme you run to slow down Derrick Henry. So I think 100% this game, in terms of defense, it comes down to Vic Fangio.
Yeah, like I said, the last time Vic Fangio, when he was the Miami defensive coordinator last year, he gave up 56 points to Lamar Jackson's. But obviously, like you said, it's just a different defense. I'm a little bit nervous about the linebackers in space versus Derrick Henry and just getting to him, because I mean the dude's gigantic, can lay the boom on you, but he also can just outrun you, and a lot of the times he just elects to outrun you and is just faster than everybody and can get to the edge. And I think an underrated element to the Ravens offense is their passing game with Lamar Jackson, how efficient he's been. I think Zay Flowers is a pretty good receiver, so I don't think that's a light matchup for Quinyon Mitchell on the outside at all. I think he's going to have his hands full with Zay Flowers. Sometimes Zay Flowers sees volume and other times he doesn't. That's the one thing about Lamar. He kind of keeps you on your toes with who he's using it with his weapons. And Rashad Bateman's not the best receiver in the world, but he makes plays. He made a phenomenal catch on Monday Night Football this past week. So I think the tight ends are also going to have success, and that's maybe a matchup that the Ravens could exploit, is their tight ends matching up with the Eagles' safeties and linebackers in the passing game.
Yeah, like I've mentioned previously, I think.
I mean, Mike Gesicki wrecked us.
Yeah, we have been looking at that as an example for a while, but we haven't really seen a tight end absolutely wreck us since then. Aside from the final drive of the game against the Commanders when they just gashed us with Zach Ertz, but that was in garbage time, so that doesn't really count. Um, So, I mean, we'll see if tight ends are still a matchup problem for us, but we haven't really seen it since Mike Gesicki. So we'll see. Um, I think Zay Flowers gets absolutely locked up. I think he's going to be in Guantanamo Bay all game. You saw Puka Nacua have a great game while not having to go up against Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell allowed one catch for 14 yards from him. Isaiah Rodgers allowed him to just do whatever he wanted. I honestly don't get the hype on Isaiah Rodgers. I think he's terrible. I truly think he is. I think
I don't think he's
some
terrible. I
people,
just think he's
some people
significant.
were saying like, Darius Slay's washed. Put in Isaiah Rodgers instead.
I never believed that.
Yeah, I know you haven't, but my God, Darius Slay is so much better.
I'm a
Isaiah
huge
Rodgers.
Darius Slay
That's not
guy.
even
I think
close.
Darius Slay is still really good. I mean, the only thing about Darius Slay is he goes down with an injury literally. How many times this year has it been? Literally 8 games out of like the 11 games where he's gone down with an injury in the game.
Yeah, it's
It's
a
felt
weekly
like it. But
routine at
Isaiah
this
Rodgers,
point.
the thing about him is I don't think he's terrible, but I think he's like
He's awful.
significantly not as good as the other guys. And I
He's
think
just
Eli
not
Ringo
good.
has more potential than him and might
Yeah,
already be better than him. So I don't understand
yeah.
why Isaiah Rodgers always gets the playing time
I
over
don't get
Eli
it
Ringo.
either. I don't
That's
get it
one of the
either.
big things that makes me upset. I think they would I would have thought that they would have tried to get more out of their investment on Keely Ringo, but I guess at the end of the day, it was a 4th-round pick, and they don't really care. And the Georgia Bulldog thing, and but I
But
think
yeah,
I don't
anyway,
know if
well, hold on, because I didn't end up finishing my point. Zay Flowers is not as talented as Puka Nacua, obviously. He doesn't have other wide receivers
he
around
presents a
him.
completely different challenge, though.
He does, but he also doesn't have
It's not
other.
always about who can
Hold on, I need to finish my point here because we're starting to run out of time. I just want to finish this point. Zay Flowers doesn't have other receivers around him that are gonna take the attention off of him, which will allow him to have success, such as a guy like Puka Nacua, the type of offense he's in. Um, I think Zay Flowers is going to be in prison all game to the likes of Jamar Chase and Terry McLaurin. I think it's 1000% going to come down to trying to stop not only Derrick Henry but Lamar Jackson out of the backfield. That's the one thing that worries me about this team a bit is they don't seem to do the best job at keeping mobile quarterbacks from leaving the pocket. I mean, they allowed Matthew Stafford to run for a first down against them, and the broadcast team was utterly shocked that Matthew Stafford ran for a first down because he never does that. So that to me, that's my biggest worry about this matchup is keeping Lamar Jackson in the pocket.
I don't think Zay Flowers is going to get completely locked down. I think he
He will
presents
be.
a unique type of matchup. I mean, there's not too many guys that are as agile, can change directions as fast as him. So I think he will present a little bit of difficulties. I think their overall passing game, you're sleeping on it. I mean, go look at Lamar's stats. He's having an unbelievable
He
passing.
hasn't gone up against Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. First of all, the Eagles are considered to be the number one defense in the NFL right now. So all I can really say is he has not gone up against the Eagles yet.
Yeah.
I
And
saw
the Eagles haven't
earlier,
gone up.
not only are they number one in yards allowed, but they're also number one in yard differential by a wide margin. Their yard differential is like plus 1100. I think the next best is like 850. Um, this is listen, this is going to be a big test for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a very very good football team. Um, it's not going to come easy. I could very much see them losing this game earlier when they start
I
playing
think
well.
when we did the schedule predictions earlier this year before the season started, we both picked this as a scheduled loss, correct?
And not only that, once they started playing well at the halfway point of the season, we redid our predictions for the second half of the season, and we both predicted this a loss yet again. So I think this is a game they could very much end up losing. I think this is going to be a very tough test for them. But I also think you need to give the Eagles their credit when looking at this matchup. You know, you can look at how great Lamar's been, you can look at how great Derrick Henry's been, but you also have to look at how great the Eagles defense has been. And if you are a Ravens fan, let's say we flip the script here. Let's say we're two Ravens fans looking ahead at the matchup against the Eagles, right? We're going to be looking at it being like, you know, what are the Ravens going to have to do to put up a considerable amount of points against this top defense, right? So, you know, there's also that, that this is still an elite defense. And I think as great as Lamar Jackson is and as good as the passing game has looked, I think it's not nearly as big of a factor as the run game and as Lamar Jackson's ability to run when considering how great the Eagles' pass defense has been.
Yeah, I just always think that how as good as the Eagles' pass defense has been, I think there's always room for error, especially versus a two-time winning NFL MVP quarterback. You know what I mean? So we'll see.
Well,
I'm not
he's a
saying the Eagles
two-time
are going to get
MVP
torched or
quarterback,
anything, but
but a big aspect of his game is the part I'm most worried about for the game. You know, it's not like he won his MVPs just off of his arm. A big part of it was his legs, and that looking at this matchup, that is what scares me the most is his legs.
yeah, I mean, that's fair to say. I think his legs are obviously completely dangerous, and that's what makes him Lamar Jackson. But I think people also are still underrating his passing game ability and
No,
what
I'm
he's
not.
able to
I'm
do in
not
the passing game.
overrating. I'm not underrating his passing game. I think he has a great passing game. I'm one of the people who always defends him when people call him a running back. But I'm like I said, I'm looking at the matchup, right? So although I really like Lamar Jackson's passing game, this is an elite pass defense. And what I think is the secret Achilles heel of this defense is their capability of keeping a quarterback in the pocket. I think that's secretly their Achilles heel. I think that is the one aspect of this defense that worries me is I don't think they're really capable of keeping mobile quarterbacks from escaping their pocket and hurting you with their legs. So I'm talking about from a matchup standpoint. Um, that is why Lamar's legs worry me the most about this game. It's not because I think his legs are far more dangerous than his arm. It's because I think he's going up against a defense where he's not going to be as effective with his arm, but I think he's going to have pretty good success with his legs because I think that is the secret Achilles heel of this defense.
I would say too, yeah. I would say at times that's where I get nervous is about some of the athletes that they have lined up in space with other athletes, where it's Lamar Jackson versus the Reed Blankenship's in open space, or Nakobe Dean versus Lamar Jackson in open space, or one of these tight ends getting open over the middle with the safeties trying to cover them, or the linebackers trying to cover them, or just as Zay Flowers zooming over the middle and Nakobe Dean in his zone coverage tries to cover him and he just can't get there. I've just seen plays like that happen too many times. So I think like that can happen. I think the Ravens are dangerous and can just hit you in a lot of different ways. And just the only thing is my expectation for this game isn't that the Eagles pass defense is going to completely shut down the Ravens pass offense. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Ravens are going to be able to take on a bounced attack. But real quickly, before we move on and give the meatball of the week, what does the Eagles offense have to do versus the Ravens defense to win this game?
Same old, same old. I
Same old
mean,
ride Saquon all the way
yeah,
home.
we just talked about how great this offensive line is, how great Saquon is. Um, that's all
The
you got to
Ravens
do.
do have the number one rush defense in the league. Their pass defense is absolutely horrible, even though they have good players on their defense, which doesn't make sense. They have good players on the defensive line, at linebacker, and in the secondary. Marlon Humphrey has I think the third most picks in the league. Kyle Hamilton is an absolute stud. They have studs all over their secondary. Nate Wiggins has been a really good cornerback. He's another guy that the Eagles were looking into in the draft, but they obviously made the right decision in going with Quinyon Mitchell. But the Ravens defense isn't lacking talent, but as a statistical standpoint for this year, the Ravens pass defense has been really bad, but their rush defense has been pretty good. So the Eagles might have to pass the ball a little bit more, and they might opt to, in general, pass the ball a little bit more just based off the numbers and the way that they can probably attack this Ravens defense. And hopefully Devontae Smith is back in the lineup and this offense can be fully healthy and they can start to get that going. I still do think they're going to be a run heavy team regardless of what the matchup is. That's just their identity and what they do. I think they're always going to get the volume in the numbers, but it just comes down to the production standpoint of whether the run game's actually working or not.
I just think this run game is unstoppable. It is possible it's not working and they have to go to the pass more, but I see that being a first half thing. Like I said, I mean, this offensive line just wears teams out. I could see maybe in the first half they have to go to the pass more and get it done through the passing game. But by the second half, I think the holes are really going to start to open up. Best run defense in the NFL or not. I mean, this is the best run attack in the NFL. You want to talk about the best run defense? It's the best run attack. So, I don't think. I think if you have a good running attack, like top 10, maybe you have the eighth best running attack. You're like, okay, we've been running the ball all year, but we're going up against the best run defense. So let's switch up our strategy. But if you have the best running game in the NFL, even if you're going up against the best run defense, you're not going to switch up your strategy. You're going to say you have the best run defense. All right, well, we have the best run game. So, I mean, we're going to show you that we can still get it done with the run because you may have the best run defense. We have the best running game, and you're about to find out why. So I think the run game is still going to make a big impact in this game. Before I give my meatball of the week, I will say real quick, after talking about what worries me and what doesn't worry me about this game, looking at a parlay for this game, I think personally, you want to cook up a good parlay, take the under and Lamar Jackson passing yards, take the over in Lamar Jackson rushing yards, and take the under in Zay Flowers receiving yards. My humble opinion, that's a good 3-leg parlay right there. But it is now time for my meatball of the week.
Do you have any of those numbers readily
available?
No,
the player props aren't available yet. So
I think you're leading people in the wrong direction because you don't even know what the numbers are.
It doesn't matter what the numbers are. Take the parlay. Anyhow, it's time for my meatball of the week. And now I think about it, I should have done this much earlier because we've already touched on this subject for the most part. But my meatball of the week is Joe Sheen, whatever the hell this idiot's last name is. Who, cocky laughing when the owner was talking about how he didn't want to let Saquon go to Philly. Sosa's driving up the price. Philly might be out. Yeah, test the market, see how it goes. Get back to us. We don't care. That cocky little fuck. I'm sorry. It's just every time I see that clip, that cocky look on his face just makes me want to punch him. Not only did you let Saquon walk, you let him walk because you paid Daniel Jones a ton of money. And Daniel Jones is not even on your team anymore. You cut him because he stunk that bad. Joe Schoen, you're my meatball of the week.
Yeah. I don't even care about the Giants being ever associated with Saquon, so I don't even care about taunting them. I mean, taunting them about Saquon is like
it's just that cocky look on his face in that clip just pisses me off so much. The owners were like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know how I'm gonna sleep if Saquon goes to Philly, and then they cut to that guy, and he's just like, like, what are you fucking laughing about? Sorry for cursing, but what are you fucking laughing about? I mean, you act like it's just irrelevant if you keep Saquon or not. And now look. It just drives me.
You sound like a Giants fan right now.
Well,
You sound like
I guess
genuinely
I
upset
do.
and mad. You sound like you're mad that he did that when you should be celebrating that situation.
No, like I'm happy he did it. It just pisses me off how somebody can just be such a cocky idiot, you know? I mean,
After,
I'm glad
no,
he's a cocky idiot, but it's I don't know, it just pisses me off. It's like how stupid can you be? How stupid can you really be?
it is what it is. The Eagles are benefiting now from it, so gotta hang her hat. But let's move on to some Sixers talk. I mean, is there any too many positive things to talk about besides Jared McCain himself?
No, I mean, listen,
How
everything
do
we've
you how do
talked.
you how do you let's start here. How do you feel about the Sixers right now, knowing that they hit on
I don't care.
another steal in the draft? This was supposed to be the offseason that they got things right. They got the Tobias Harris contract off the books. Joel Embiid was finally going to have a true running mate with him to make a finals push, along with Tyrese Maxey emerging as a draft still from years before. They signed Tyrese Maxey to an extension. They signed Joel Embiid to an extension. They get Paul George in free agency, a forward that finally can, do versatile things. And, all the winning formula in the NBA is this stylistic type player. And it's not working out as an on the court standpoint. Everything that people mocked them for, even with Paul George playing 72 games last year, him now being injury prone, or I mean, he's always been injury prone, but it revisiting with him in an early stint with the Sixers, him already being hurt twice with the same exact injury, and that whole situation looks like a mess. The whole Joel Embiid getting suspended for 3 games, pushing the reporter in the locker room, not knowing when he's going to play games, not playing back to backs, them losing games regardless of who's on the court. With all that being said, is that all being outweighed by the draft steal of this year? And it wasn't
No,
like, Tyrese
no,
Maxey.
no, not at all. I mean, listen, I love what Jared McCain's doing on the court. He's like another Tyrese Maxey out there. He looks phenomenal. It's great that they've hit on another pick outside of the lottery, and it's very exciting to see what this backcourt duo can do as the years go on. But it doesn't outweigh any of that. Are you kidding me? I mean, like we've been waiting for years for this Sixers team to finally get over the hump, and it felt like, okay, maybe this year, maybe they can actually do it. And then it's like, nope. Not only can they not do it, but everything has gone to shit. It's all gone to shit. And I'm supposed to not care because Jared McCain's having a great rookie year. I mean, I'm just so over it. I'm just over it at this point. The Eagles are looking phenomenal. I'm focused on them. I can't even get stressed out over this dumpster fire of an organization.
Well, you were stressed about the Eagles when the Phillies were making their playoff run,
That's
and you
called
were
the
excited.
Philly. No, the Phillies. We never had confidence in them in the postseason, so it's not
Yeah, you
the
did.
same thing.
Yeah, you did.
No, it didn't.
Yes, you did.
Maybe early in September, I thought they were gonna have a postseason, but as late
You
September
told me you
happened,
weren't worried. You told me you weren't worried about the Phillies bullpen whatsoever going into the playoffs, and I was like, what are you talking about? That's my
well,
biggest worry.
I was worried about the bats. That I was wrong on what would be the reasoning for them losing that series. I thought the offense was going to look terrible, but and I thought it was just going to be very low scoring games that they would lose, because that's what we saw out of the last half of September. So I thought what in early September I thought things were looking good and they were poised for a big postseason run. As they played their final series in mid to late September, I had very little confidence going into the postseason. The Mets were red hot. The Phillies did not look good. Postseason baseball is all about what team's the hottest. You can go back and look at the podcast right before the postseason started. I did not have much confidence in this Phillies team going into the postseason. But still, I mean, this is apples to oranges. You're talking about a Sixers team that's like 2-13 compared to a
Well, let
Phillies
me ask you
team.
this then: how would you navigate the rest of the season? You had all those big contracts on the books. You're getting contributions from guys like Yabusele's been playing really well this year too. He's somebody that you can extend at some point in the future. Do you try and go out in the trade deadline and acquire more and maybe trade draft picks? Or do you
No,
keep your draft picks now because you're hitting on all these guys like Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain? Do you go out and are you aggressive in trying to make a move and make amends meet this year? Do you sit Paul George and Joel Embiid, or do you try and let Joel Embiid play when he's healthy and keep him on this injury management thing because you think that's your best hope of
here's what you
winning?
do. Here's what you do. You wait until this team is finally, finally all on the court together. Because we saw it for like a half a game. You wait till this team is finally all on the court together. Because looking at it on paper, a team with Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Joel Embiid, and Paul George sounds dangerous on paper. So you wait until you finally get to see that in action. And if they start winning games together going into the deadline, then yeah, maybe you look to improve the roster a bit. But if things are still an absolute mess going into the deadline, why even bother trading for someone when you're not even going to make the playoffs?
That is true. That is a lot of I mean, it seems tough because it seems like all those guys are scoring profile type of guys. I mean, I guess Paul George can fade back a little bit from his role of having the ball in his hands all the time, but Joel Embiid loves having the ball in his hands on offense. So does Tyrese Maxey, and Jeremy McKean has proven to be a volume shooter himself. So, do you think when everybody's healthy that the best option for the Sixers is to keep Jared McCain in the lineup with Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid, or would you have him running your second unit and playing a lot of minutes off the bench? And then not only would he qualify probably for Rookie of the Year, but he would also probably be in the running for Sixth Man of the Year as well.
Um, I'm
Because you got to
I don't
think like
know.
how
You
dynamic,
gotta
how
you gotta look at it. You gotta look at how he does with all those guys. Like I'm saying, we need to finally see this team all on the court together. So you need to see how well he gels with all those guys on the
well,
court
we've
all
seen
at
Jared
once.
McCain get buckets with Joel Embiid on the court with him. We've seen him get buckets with Tyrese Maxey on the court with him. I think he's
But
gotten
not all
buckets with Paul
three.
George, but
But
not
not all
all of them
three.
together.
So I
No,
mean, you
that's
got to
true.
see how it plays out. Right now, just let's just wait and see if there's a glimmer of hope once everyone gets on the court together. That's just my thoughts on everything right now. Let's
But what
wait.
should the what's the expectation for when they get on the court? Because if it takes an extended period of time, right now they're like 3-13. So like they need to tread water somehow to get themselves into competition whatsoever. So when they do get healthy, it's not too late already for this season.
Well, when you put it like that, I would say this season might be a wash then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, how much longer can they go without everyone being healthy? I understand that they can't do anything about
Not
that,
much
but
longer, but looking at their upcoming schedule. Um, they have the Rockets at home. Now it's the Rockets, but they're at home. Maybe that's a game they can win.
the Rockets are like a top 4 seed in the West this year.
Yeah, but they're at home, and if they get Embiid back, maybe that's a game they can win. But then you look at their games on the road. They have the Pistons and the Hornets. Maybe they can win both those games. Um, and then they have 2 games in a row at home again. And then they play the Bulls on the road. Um, it seems like all the crappy teams they're playing on the road, and all the good teams they're playing at home. So all those games they have a chance because they're at home, and all the games against crappy teams, it doesn't matter they're on the road because it's against a crappy team. Um, so looking at their upcoming schedule, I think maybe they have a chance to win a good amount of games. Hopefully, go 3-2 over their next 5. That sounds very optimistic, but maybe they can. I don't know. Fuck this team anyway.
I mean, I guess we'll have to say. Obviously, basketball, you can't even like really like pinpoint games that they're gonna win or this, that, the other because of how often injuries. Um, you know what I mean? So We don't know who's going to be playing. We don't know if Zach LaVine's going to be in the Bulls game, just for an example, or who's going to be playing this night, or who's even going to be on the court for the Sixers. But at the end of the day, with everything that's going negative for the Sixers this season, to hit on another guy that is that young in the NBA and, to add him to Tyrese Maxey, I feel pretty good about that situation. And if they end up being really bad and they have a high draft pick, they have to give away their draft pick if it's not a certain lottery pick, I think. But if they keep the lottery pick and they have all these guys back, I mean, you can really turn the keys over to the franchise to Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain in the future and Joel Embiid. But I just don't want this situation to get really sour, because it may start to seem like maybe Joel might demand out or ask out if things keep going poorly.
At this point, I really don't even care. I just don't. I just feel
It just
so.
feels like a lot of time wasted with Joel Embiid if that's how it comes down.
I just feel so emotionally exhausted from this team. It's like year after year. Oh, can they finally get over hope? Can they finally get over the hump? And now just everything's gone to shit. So just like, all right, whatever. Just I don't even care anymore. One final thing before we get out of here. I have two questions to ask you. One question and one follow-up question. How many fantasy points did you put up this week?
I don't check that league, and I don't even pay
I
attention.
I will give you the answer then. 148 fantasy points. Now, my follow-up question. Did you win in fantasy this week?
No, and I don't care.
Bro,
you have really one fantasy league. You act like this is my only fantasy league, and it's because I got dealt a bad hand. I got the best player in the league, and somehow my team
it's not that. I just think it's really funny that in this league your team was doing really bad for a while. Finally, you put up a whopping 148 points, which, by the way, second best in the league this week. By a large margin.
To the person that I played.
Yeah, but the guy you played put up 161 points. It's like, how bad can your luck be?
Bro, my kicker, I had Jake Elliott. He puts up 13 points. That's like a phenomenal kicking performance. This dude's kicker, Will Lutz, puts up 22.
You had Saquon Barkley. You had Saquon Barkley, and you still lost.
He's got 45 points. This dude, between his tight end and his kicker, had 45 points. What am I supposed to do?
No, there was nothing you could do. You put up 148 points. That should be a win. That should be an automatic win.
He had the first game where Patrick Mahomes actually looked like Patrick Mahomes and put up 28 points and 3 touchdowns on me. So that shouldn't have happened.
He got 11 points out of Rico Dowdle, even with a fumble, which is -2.
Crazy. But I have 2 other leagues that I am flourishing in, so that's why I really could care less. I wish I was competitive in this league, but it's just annoying that you have one league and you're doing well, and your team. How did your team do this week?
We lost this week, but not in a hilarious fashion. That's why I'm just talking about your team. I'm not shitting on your team.
I stopped caring about losses. Really after I went on I'm on a 10-game losing streak right now.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, no, I'm on an 11-game losing streak because I won week 1. So I have lost 11 straight games in fantasy.
You would have beat me this week. You would have crushed me this week. You would have crushed pretty much anyone this week. Definitely Anthony's awesome team that put up 57 points. What an embarrassment. Brandon's Jets 59 points.
If you go look at the points allowed and go look at my points allowed compared to everybody else's, it's not even remotely close. I have the most points scored against me. Not even remotely close. We're talking 200 points is like the next closest.
Oh my God.
I'm at like 1,600. So that's not even me having a bad team. That's just like outrageous people just putting up numbers on me for no reason.
And it's very, very funny. Now, in all fairness, you don't have as many points for as
I'm like middle of the pack points for.
Yeah, you're middle of the pack. But you're not doing bad in points for, but Yeah, and points allowed. That's a true.
If my points allowed was like 200
82.
points less, I would probably be like a 5-loss team.
Yeah, you could say that. Let me actually real quick. I want to look at your schedule and see how many of those games you had a good performance, but just lost because of a ridiculous opponent performance. So you had the win. Then you lost 101 to 143. Okay, maybe I could give you that. Then you lost 104 to 131. Maybe that as well. Then this is when you went on a bad streak of games 63, 69, 96, 99. So those are still 4 losses right there. Then you put up 131 and lost. Gotta give it to you there. Then you put up 115 and lost. Gotta give it to you there. Then you put up 95 and lost. That's still should be a loss either way. Then you put up 104 and still lost. That could go either way. And then 140 and still lost.
People were sending me outrageous trades in the beginning of the year too, and I should have just actually no. I don't want to help anybody out. I want to rot in people's teams. So I've been hoping that I could like ruin some people's playoff hopes, but I just literally can't win. I'm on 11-game losing streak.
Well, let's see. Your final 2 games are against Fadeaway's fantastic team and Matt's motivated team. Let me see if either of them have playoff hopes.
Nope, 6-6 and 4-8.
What is my current playoff probability? 78%. That's pretty good. I have a tough matchup this week.
You're the 4 seed right now.
Yeah, I'm the 4 seed. I was the 3rd seed before this loss.
It looks like the 5th seed is 7-5. So
I'm trying to look at my matchup for this week, but it's not giving it to me. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so I'm facing Anthony's awesome team. Now, as it stands right now, his projection is 76.7. So you're like, well, that seems pretty easy. But he has some really good guys on his bench. He has Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Joe Burrow. If he plugs those guys into the starting lineup, then Jamar Chase is projected 20 points. If he plugs those guys into the lineup, it's a much closer game. And you could also say, well, he's not setting as a lineup. He might be able to just coast to an easy W. Everyone sets their lineup against me and only me. I check these scores week after week after week and week after week after week. I'm seeing team after team after team not setting their lineup, and not once have I gone up against a team who has not set their lineup. Capalot, the guy who's famous for not setting his lineup, who didn't do it again this past week. The only week he set his lineup was against me. I still beat him. I still beat him. But everyone, it's like every time they face me, they're like, oh, you know what I haven't done in a while? I haven't set my lineup for the Elevation E5280 Sports Fantasy Football League. Let me do that.
You haven't even heard me.
And this guy has a damn good team if he sets his lineup. You
haven't heard me raise my voice one time, and I've allowed the most points in the league by like 300. So I don't know why you're raising.
Yeah, but that's a different kind of shit luck. That's shit. You know,
that is the most demoralizing thing in fantasy football. Is something that you can't control. Is other teams' lineups just going crazy and berserk on you, and every week teams that are scoring 80 points the last week and barely coming on, that have 2 to 3 wins, or just dropping 140 right in the breadbasket on me. So we also had one commented on here. I don't know if you want to speak on that, Dante. Is this one of your comrades here, Dominic Pileggi? The Sixers lack imagination.
That's an inside joke. Yeah, that's my uncle Dominic. That's an inside joke, because after the Eagles threw a deep ball touchdown to AJ Brown against I want to say the Jaguars, was it? That was what he had to say. He said, "Yeah, but where's the imagination?" So we pick on him for that.
That's funny. I thought that had something to do with you. But before we get out of here, Phillies, real quickly, it seems like they're not in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. There's 5 teams that formally offered a contract to Juan Soto, and the Phillies weren't one of them. So that's pretty upsetting. Also, since the last time we've been on here, I've heard Ranger Suarez's name thrown out in some trade talks or trade discussions a little bit. So I don't. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dante? Along with Alec Boehm and Nick Castellanos possibly being on the trade block as well.
Well, I did hear another name they were possibly looking to trade is Brandon Marsh, who I've said pretty much every week on this podcast. He's the guy I would trade first before anybody else. So I would like to see them. I would really like to see them upgrade Brandon Marsh, and those are my thoughts at the moment.
Upgrade Brandon Marsh, that position.
Yeah, I think I mean, I've already laid it out multiple times here, but I think he's the guy who you could definitely upgrade the most.
How do you feel about the Phillies as this like lineup only gets older? Do you think that they have what it takes and they're just underperforming in a way, or do you think that they're actually missing a piece to the equation? And that could be just looking at them based on themselves, or looking at some of the competition that's out around the league right now, like a team like the Dodgers and how stacked they are and how good the Yankees look this year. Like, are this Philly's good enough to beat those teams and they're just underperforming and just haven't got the job done and they lose to a
I
team
think
that
the
can match, or
talent.
do
I
they
think
just
the
not get
talent
matched?
is all there. I think the talent's all there. I think they just need to get it together.
Do
What
you
I
think this
find
makeshift outfield they can win with this makeshift outfield? You just said that you wanted to upgrade Brandon Marsh. I feel like they only have one of those positions locked down. Their infield's pretty good, but inconsistent. Even with one of the stars that they locked down and gave a gigantic contract to, Bryce is really the only guy in the infield that they can trust offensively. Alec Boehm can't be trusted, even though he puts up good regular season numbers, but he's kind of flaky and up and down. Trey Turner is amazing at times, and other times he's really wishy-washy and doesn't really produce too often. And Bryson Stott doesn't give you too much offensively and had a down season last year. And it seems like JT's only getting older. So I do think the infield is still really good, but the outfield is a question mark. And I'm starting to believe that they just don't have what it takes at the current moment to match up with some of these teams around the league.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think if every player plays up to their standards, I think this is a World Series roster. If everyone plays up to their standards. The problem is they're not all doing that. And so the whole thing with Brandon Marsh, right? If he plays up to his absolute best ability, I would say he's probably a 280 hitter, 15 or so home runs, plays great defense. We've gone to a World Series with him. And in that regards, there's no reason to trade him. However, this whole team is not all playing up to their standards, and you have to look to improve the roster because of it. And I think he's the most tradable, most upgradable position. So it's not like, like, oh, you're saying you think this roster has what it takes to get it done. Why are you talking about trading Brandon Marsh? It's because this team is just not getting it done. So you got to upgrade it. But I think when you look at everyone individually and you look at what they're capable of, if they all do what they're capable of, then I think it's a World Series roster. The problem is you can't bank on that, so you have to make upgrades.
Well, who can you really rely on in this offense? Like who are
Harper,
the guys that should be relied on?
Harper.
I mean, one guy can't win you a championship.
Well, no, that's not what I
Shohei didn't
mean.
even have.
That's not what. Hold on, that's not what I mean. What I mean is Harper is the one guy you can absolutely trust to be the best version of himself.
Yeah,
Can
but
you
that's
trust?
that.
Can you trust Trey Turner to be at his best? No. Can you trust Nick Castellanos to be at his best? No. Can you trust Kyle Schwarber to be at his best? No. But then you say, oh, well, you can't just win the World Series with one guy. I'm not saying Bryce Harper is the only great hitter on the team. I think many of these guys are great hitters. But if you're talking about the guy who I trust the most to be a great hitter. That's Bryce Harper. And that just
Not
goes
trust the
back.
most, but if you can't, you just said you can't trust all those guys outside of Bryce Harper,
No,
but you
he's the
do
only
believe,
one I absolutely trust. But like I'm saying,
but
if
you do believe
everyone
that they can still
plays
win.
up to their best ability, then there's no reason they can't win a World Series. But I just don't trust them all to do that. I only trust Harper to do that,
So
which
what
is
do you think
why
the
I'm
solution
saying
is?
you should still make upgrades because these people are not playing to their best ability. So time to make upgrades.
Yeah, I think that they had to get like a clear second option outside of Bryce Harper because I don't think that they have a clear second option. I think
I mean, the only other clear second option who's available is Juan Soto. Anyone else who, if they bring in, it's going to be another big name who hopefully they can make a big contribution. But there is no clear second option to Bryce Harper available out there other than Juan Soto.
yeah. We'll see how it plays out, but I don't think that I can, it's not even just about a trust thing. I think that they're just missing a piece, and it's kind of demoralizing a little bit because they went to the World Series and they added a huge superstar name, a guy that was seen as the top 15 player in Trey Turner, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump with Trey Turner. So like, what's the next step of what they need to add? Because you see the impact that a superstar that you get in free agency can make in Shohei Ohtani, and a guy like that is out there in Juan Soto, and they just weren't able to get him. And it seems like they're not in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And it's just like, why aren't you even trying to really get into the Juan Soto sweepstakes? Is it like a money thing? Because it seemed like before that they were willing to pay any price to get into that, but on other guys, but they're, not in on one of like a generational player. So I'm just a little confused by that, but.
I mean, like you said, we'll see how everything shakes up.
Yeah, we shall see. But thank you guys for tuning in to episode 74 of the Paisan Sports podcast. We will be back next week, hopefully celebrating an Eagles victory, maybe one step closer to a Saquon MVP season. Maybe the Sixers will win some games in that time period, and the Phillies will bless us with some good all-season news. So until then, we're signing off.